It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
On Giants.com.
I like it, I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
All right, now we're joined by Giants offensive lineman Justin Pugh. Justin, man, it's good to see you back, dude.
It is good to be back.
And now you're back permanently, right? So why don't we work backwards a little bit? Take us through the decision to sign with the Giants long-term off the practice squad onto the 53 this week.
Yeah, obviously the whole goal was to come and try out, prove my knees healthy to myself first and to the team second. There was no risk there, just signed to the practice squad. Went out there in the first 10 days, was able to prove the knee was healthy, ended up starting on Sunday Night Football. And
right off the couch, as we all heard.
Straight off the couch, for sure. I mean, it really was. The weekend before, I was watching Sunday Night Football on the couch. And then the next weekend, I'm playing in Sunday Night Football. It was a dream come true. Went out there and then playing left guard, which I played the last 8 years, and then slide out to left tackle. We had an emergency situation, and went out there, played well. Fought. Had some plays I wish I could get back, just cadence and things like that. But overall, getting 80 plays in was a lot. I was sore this week. And then as soon as we got back, I told the Giants that I didn't want to be on the practice squad anymore. I wanted to get elevated. We were able to get a deal done, and now I'm here for the year. I couldn't be more excited about that.
And this was the only place you wanted to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had, teams had reached out prior to me joining the practice squad here, but, there was a situation where coming back home just felt too good.
You told a great Seinfeld story. Why don't you just share that for the people that maybe didn't hear that from the locker room the other day?
Yeah, so the genesis of me coming back to New York started this past offseason. My wife and I and our two of our closest friends, Shannon and Taylor, we went out to dinner in the city, went to this place called Teresi. It's like a new, the hot Italian place in town. And we're sitting there at dinner, and all of a sudden I hear this voice out of the corner of my ear, and, probably the most recognizable voice in show business. And
What's
I look
up with offensive linemen?
What's going on with Giants free agency? And I hear this voice. I look over. It's Jerry Seinfeld, and he's sitting there in a suit. He must have just came from a stand-up event. And we had a couple glasses of wine at that point, and I'm feeling good. It's probably
Nice.
10, 11 o'clock at night, and I just fire off a text to my agent, get me back to New York. So it's all Jerry Seinfeld's fault. If Jerry Seinfeld had never been there and it wasn't the most quintessential New York moment, I probably wouldn't have fired that text off, and maybe I would still be retired right now.
Now, you came, and I know you don't want to look too far ahead, but you came back from the injury. You didn't have to rehab. You could have retired if you wanted to. Is this something that you now want to do for a few more years? How are you thinking about this long term?
Yeah, I'm having fun. I'm taking it one game at a time, one day at a time, just focusing on this season. I signed a 1-year deal, and that's all I'm worried about. I want to come back and leave this organization better than I found it. Once a Giant, always a Giant. I truly believe that, and I'm fully embodying that right now. Coming back and finishing a season healthy, going out on my terms. I'm having a daughter in January.
Congratulations.
So I'm getting ready to be a father. So there's so many moving parts. I'm just happy to be here, and we're just going to enjoy this ride this year.
So you timed it right. If the baby comes after the season, you don't have to worry about lacking the sleep. You timed that up very nicely, actually.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
As someone that had their first kid in like August,
Yeah.
not the best.
Not the best idea.
Not the best. All right, so let's talk about getting ready. You got here. I'm sure you figured, a couple weeks, 3 weeks to acclimate, learn the playbook and everything. 10 days later, you're playing 80 snaps. So what was it like trying to, from a physical and mental perspective, getting ready to go out there, just learning a system and a team and your teammates and all that in 10 days?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the ACL, the physical became a whole lot harder than it had been in the past, just gaining that confidence. Once I gained that confidence, it's like riding a bike, playing offensive line. Then you go out there and you start learning the playbook, and the mental gymnastics of learning the playbook is definitely something that, is a tough component to anything. When you're coming off the streets, it's learning a new language.
Sure.
It's like, you go down to Mexico, you don't know how to speak Spanish. It just takes you a little while to get it figured out. But all the plays are very, very similar. Most offenses in the NFL run plays. They put some window dressing on it. It's mostly the same. It's just learning the vernacular of the Giants offense. So being able to do that was great. And then sliding out to left tackle.
That was going to be my follow-up, right?
It's even more stressful. Silent cadence is something that I haven't worked on here with these guys before. Mm-hmm. So really getting into the groove of how to work silent cadence, and a little bit different than how I've done it in the past. As you saw, I had some trouble the first few series getting out of my stance.
On that one snap against Epinesa, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those, and then another one I jumped off sides trying to time it too early. So once we got that figured out, then Ben Bredesen and Mark Lewinsky were kind of like, hey, this is the play, and it's this type of protection or this run, and we were able to work through it, and it was great. I mean, it was just going out there and playing football and fighting. That was my scenario, and I talk about it more in depth on my podcast too. So you got to check out my podcast.
Check it out, please.
Net Worth with Justin Pugh. I'm talking about the ecosystem in the business of sports with fans and NFL players. So I'm trying to be a place where NFL guys can go to for advice, and also the fans, and giving them an inside glance at what the business of football looks like. So I'm going to be talking about my contract, this past game, a lot of different things.
And now you talk about changing positions, right? As of this recording on Thursday, maybe you're not going to tell me I know, but I don't know what position you're going to play on Sunday. Depends who's healthy, who's playing, who's out there. So as you try to now get this playbook set, you kind of have to learn your responsibilities in different spots on different plays. So what has that been, kind of still not knowing exactly where you're going to plug in here?
I'm just learning all the plays, and wherever I go, it's probably better that I learn it from a tackle and guard position, so I can play either one of those positions. We have a great group of guys. They've been super helpful. Getting me the call right when we get out of the huddle, or me knowing the call, but just little things. It allows you to speed up your way of playing, and that's been a blessing to have a guy like Ben Bredesen who knows the offense inside and out. I'll be very, very excited to get Andrew Thomas back and have him at his natural position, because he knows the playbook, so well. It's like having another coach on the field.
How is it learning kind of the stuff you could only learn by being out there with the guys, the chemistry, understanding how somebody combo blocks, when you can release to get to the second level? How has it been learning that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's two guys working together. They have to learn me as well.
And it's different guys you're working with, right, depending on where you're at.
Constantly talking, over-communicating is the key, and getting a hat on a hat. Those are the two main goals that we have right now. Over-communicate, no offsides, no pre-snap penalties. You're going to have holdings. You're going to get beat. Look, I'm not sugarcoating anything. Like, I'm an all-pro guard, and I just, I'm coming back. I'm going to have some issues. There's going to be times that you're going to be on edge, but eliminate the pre-snaps and eliminate the mental errors and be on a guy, get a hat on a hat, and we're going to have successful plays.
What has it been like coming off this first game? How sore are you? How's the leg, and how's everything else?
The knee has been no issue whatsoever.
That's great.
So it was as good of an outcome as you come playing 80 plays. And, I'm going against a guy like Von Miller, and he's still easing back in, coming off a catastrophic injury. So 80 plays, I was nervous about the knee, and I had no issues whatsoever. Now, overall soreness, just from playing football and getting hit, and I got bruises on, here, and then everything starts hurting. I feel like I got hit by a truck on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday's practice, I was still on E.
You only had one padded practice right before the game. That was it, right?
Yeah, I had about
That's crazy.
20.
1 year, one padded practice.
I had 20 plays, and then went out there and played 80. It was, felt like I got hit by a Mack truck, and I'm now just at 75%. We'll be at 100% tomorrow into Saturday, and then we go do it all over again.
Now, your playing weight's down.
Yes.
You're around like 290, give or take?
Yeah, somewhere between 290, 295.
Is this what you played at in your year before the injury too, or are you lower than you were before then?
I am heavier than I played in Arizona. I played lighter than this in Arizona.
Did you really?
Yeah, I played somewhere around 280 to 285 in there. I'm probably 10 pounds heavier than I even was in Arizona.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. As I'm sure if I talked to Justin Pugh rookie that you're going to play at 290, but Justin Pugh rookie would have been like, well, that's crazy. I can't play at 290. So what is it about what you've learned and being a veteran that now allows you to play at that lighter weight and maybe playing better than you did when you were heavier?
Yeah, I'm more aggressive in my style of play. It allows me to play with confidence, get off the ball. I'm playing my style, not what someone else wants me to do, and that is giving me the ability to go out there and play free. And like I said before, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to shoot my hands, I'm going to get into a dogfight, make it gritty, make it grimy. I tell everyone, I play like a gnat. You may get me one play, but I'm going to come back up, and you have to keep smacking at me and trying to keep knocking me down. And I don't think a lot of guys out there want to do that for an entire game.
So I imagine without the body mass, then it's all about understanding your angles, understanding your technique, getting your hands inside, all that stuff becomes even more important, right?
Yeah, you have to be a technician, getting your hands in the right place, getting your hat in the right place, making sure your footwork's on point, you have a great base. And that's just kind of things that I've always had, and I didn't know how to totally utilize them. So I've changed my game around a little bit, and it's not for everyone. There's some schemes that I may not fit in, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be a great communicator. I'm going to be on the right guy, and I'm going to work my butt off.
All right, let's talk about the opponent real quick before we say goodbye.
Yeah.
You have to go lift and make sure you keep that weight where you want it to be.
Exactly.
Tough opponent this week. You're familiar with their front. I'm just going to go real quick. You could rapid fire each guy because they're all a different challenge. I'll go left to right. I'll go right to left on their line. Chase Young, let's start with him.
Yeah, Chase Young, obviously very, very high draft pick. There's a reason he was taken second overall. He has all the tools, elite pass rusher.
Looks good this year too.
Coming back from injury, he's looking better than ever. So your work's cut out for you with Chase. And then you go inside, probably their best player, Jonathan Allen.
Yep.
Perennially just Pro Bowler, all pro. He has one of the best moves in football. He has this little chop hump move that is borderline unstoppable. He's a great player. You have Durant Payne at the next defensive tackle spot, and he's more of a twitchier guy, likes to jump around. He likes to talk a lot, so we have to make sure we keep our composure there. And then you have Montez Sweat, who's probably playing his best football right now. Long, rangy guy, 6'6", 6'7". Right? He's more that speed to power guy. Mm-hmm. Chase is more just straight line power, has some moves, can work around. So you have those guys. They play a lot of snaps. And behind them, there's a few other players that can really play as well. Our job is to get after them, to get up on the ball and call the plays that are called and just put body shots on them, play after play, and go out there and find a way to get a win.
Final question. Where's this offense at? Because you guys did move the ball fairly well last week. You got over 300 yards of offense. You just couldn't get things done in the red zone. So how are you guys feeling about yourselves as a unit, trying to move the ball and ultimately getting the touchdowns, which you have to in order to win?
It's all about finishing in the red zone. And for us, it's offensive line penalties, pre-snap penalties. We can't have any negative plays when we get into the red zone. We eliminate those. We get a hat on a hat, and we communicate. We're going to have a good day on Sunday. So those are our goals.
And knowing you offensive linemen, I'm sure not converting those short yardage situations drives you guys absolutely nuts, right?
100%. It allows us to get another set of downs, keep our defense off, give them a little bit of a breather, and it's just complimentary football. We have to do that on Sunday. I'm looking forward to it.
And you guys take pride in those short yardage deals too, right?
100%. It's all on us.
Good stuff, Justin. Good luck on Sunday, my man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good to talk to you, dude.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New You moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Following a 2-game road trip, the Giants return home to MetLife Stadium this Sunday to continue NFC East play as they host the 3-3 Washington Commanders in their second divisional matchup this season. To help break down the Commanders, we're now joined by a man who you can hear weekdays on 106.7 The Fan in D.C., also serves as a Commanders insider for NBC4 Sports in Washington, none other than JP Finley. JP, you got Lance Meadow here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Things are going well, Lance. Thank you for having me, man. And, it's another edition of they've had multiple names, but whenever Washington and New York play in football, you never know, but more often than not, something weird happens.
Well, especially if you go back to the two affairs last season, I'm sure Washington fans want to move on from that, whether it be a tie game or the wild ending in terms of the second matchup in D.C. But I'm sure this is going to provide quite the eventful chapter, as you can attest to. But let's move the calendar forward and focus on the Commanders team of this year. And clearly the biggest storyline, JP, is the play of Sam Howell. I would say outside of the Buffalo game in week 3, at least to the naked eye, he had no touchdowns, 4 picks in that game. But outside of that game, the production, I would say, has been pretty solid. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And we know he only had 1 start last season. So the sample size is still relatively small. Plus, there's a new offense he's had to learn. With all that being said, what has jumped out to you the most about Howell's play thus far?
Yeah, there's a lot of really encouraging signs with Sam. It's been a long time since Washington's felt like they've had a franchise quarterback. And, it's far too early to say Sam is that guy, but there are some reasons to think he might be. He's got a big arm, strong arm. He's got good feet. He can move. He can run. He can scramble, and you could call design runs for him. Kind of similar to Daniel Jones in that capacity. And then all the off-field stuff. He's everything you want your quarterback to be: calm, humble, confident, and the guys love him. Really, the only kind of question mark that's really popping up for Howell is pocket awareness and taking too many sacks. Through 6 games, he's taken 34 sacks. That's tops in the NFL. And some of that's on the Commanders' O-line, certainly, but some of that is on Howell and play calling. And that internal clock in his head has got to get faster. And honestly, I think this week's a big opportunity to show it with, what Wink Martindale likes to do defensively.
I noticed the one number that was interesting in a league where everybody tries to get rid of the football in the blink of an eye. He's holding onto the ball for about an average of 3 seconds, which clearly puts him on the very high end. So what is Eric Bieniemy, JP, trying to do to sort of navigate the internal clock versus also, to your point, the contributions that the offensive line is bringing to the table as to why he's been sacked so many times?
I actually asked EB that today, Thursday. I asked him, that this team's going to blitz him from all over the place, how do you get him to recognize that it's got to be faster? And the enemy, I think, was honest. He said, I can talk to him until he's blue in the face, but eventually he's the one on the field, and he's got to recognize it. Sometimes I think it's such a giant combination of factors. There are times where the line just hasn't been good. I think particularly on the edges, sometimes Howell doesn't have a chance. They've had some where there's a shift on where, the line is supposed to shift right. One guy misses, he goes left. There's an untouched rusher. There's been other times where a back or a tight end has kind of missed an assignment. There's been situations where maybe the receivers aren't getting enough separation and Sam can't go deep. I do think play calling has been an issue at times. You go back to that Bills game or the Bears game. The Bears game, they were down 20 points, less than 2 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. They still have Howell dropping 5-step drops out of shotgun. Does that make a lot of sense? Couldn't you just run the ball and get the game over with? So it's a true combination of factors. And I'm not, I think if you had to think about a percentage for this thing, I'd probably put it at 45 on the line, 45 on the QB, and then 10% maybe between play calling and all these other kind of interesting factors. But ultimately, if Sam is going to prove he is the franchise guy, this will have to improve. The problem is people want to make a declaration on a quarterback after 7 NFL starts. And I think it's premature. You see these, this is the guy, watch out for your backup. I just don't think we know yet. We don't know.
And I would agree with you. I think it's still a very small sample size. You brought up the play calling, JP, and I want to get more into Eric Bieniemy because this was something that brought a new wrinkle to the Washington offense. Clearly, it's been Scott Turner over the last few years, and we know Bieniemy's track record coming from Kansas City. They're a very creative offense. I understand it helps when you have Patrick Mahomes, but how much has Bieniemy tapped into that creative flavor that is so synonymous with Kansas City in terms of what he's trying to bring out of this Washington scheme?
They definitely have run some creative stuff. I think Bieniemy's flow of the game, and when he's particularly, I think he's been very sharp when he goes to the screen game. They've had some really good screens. They had a screen go for a touchdown last week to Brian Robinson. The screen game was really effective against Denver. There are times where I think Bieniemy is still in his mind calling plays with Mahomes at quarterback and not Howell, though. Mahomes, you're never out of anything. 3rd and 16, whatever. But Howell's not there yet. And sometimes I think they'd be better served to be a little more balanced. But I don't think Eric cares what people think. So I think he's going to keep running things how he sees fit. You definitely see a more motion with purpose. Some motion is just to allow the quarterback to identify where the safeties are, or if they're in man or zone. Whereas EB's motion, it tends to be to move a player to another spot, and they're going to be at that spot when the ball is snapped. It's changing the formation. They definitely run a lot of interesting stuff at the goal line. In the last couple of weeks, they had a jet sweep. They lined up 5 wide and then had a jet sweep touchdown to Curtis Samuel, which was pretty cool. They had a cool little flare out to Antonio Gibson for a touchdown last week in Atlanta. It's definitely different than it was with Scott. But another difference for Washington is Ron Rivera wants to run a real ball control, relatively conservative offensive game plan to play complementary football and keep his defense fresh, just kind of a more old school approach. And I think Ron kind of pushed that on Scott Turner. Whereas, for Eric Bieniemy, he's coming in to run his offense, and he's not going to be pushed towards anything. And I think Ron understands that, and that's what he wanted. And Ron talked about needing to shake up his offensive staff this offseason, and they did it. So, I wouldn't be expecting that. But part of me wonders, with a young QB, that's not the best way to win games. But we'll see as things continue to develop.
You were laying out all the personnel that they've been utilizing from a statistical standpoint. 5 different players have at least 130 receiving yards, and 6 different players have caught at least 1 touchdown. So that indicates to me, JP, well, Sam Howell is spreading the wealth, and he's not necessarily playing a favorite, even though it looked like Terry McLaurin early on in the Falcons game became a heavy target. How much are they truly tapping into the depths of the offensive personnel, and how much stress do you think that's putting on opposing defenses right now?
They really are spreading it around, and we kind of live in this like fantasy football player prop culture where people are all about targets. And Sam, EB, and Ron have been like, we're not about that. We want the offense to flow. Whoever's open gets the ball. Like 1 week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Logan Thomas was a huge part of the offense. Last week, I think he had 2 yards, right? Like there's a lot of variety. They also have a lot of good skill possession guys. The 3 wideouts, I'd go Terry, Jahan, Samuel, Logan at tight end. Robinson and Gibson have proven capable pass catchers that can make a guy miss. So they've got a lot of options, and it is obvious that Bieniemy wants them to spread it around. I think you can make the argument that Terry should see the ball more. What I think is effective is when Terry sees the ball early. And maybe you don't have to force feed him the rest of the day, but if you show defenses the real threat of McLaurin early, in the last 2 wins, that's happened against Denver and against Atlanta. They also did it well in Philly, a game they lost, but went to overtime. So I think get McLaurin involved early. Samuel has been really good, dude. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's a dangerous player, and I think that has kind of been a surprise. Myself included, a lot of us thought Jahan would have kind of a big breakout year. Hasn't really happened so far, and Curtis has kind of been picking up that production.
Yeah, Samuel's a very shifty guy from previous years when they brought him over from Carolina, and he had a history with Scott Turner. So I would agree with you. I think that they certainly have tapped into his skill set, and they've also tapped into, it seems, Brian Robinson as a receiver. And this is where I'm curious, JP, your thoughts, because you mentioned Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. Those are their 2 running backs. But Robinson, he's been doing, I would say, as much damage out of the backfield as a receiver than maybe the conventional way on the ground. So how much have they tried to utilize the running backs a little bit more maybe in the receiving game? And this is something that obviously the Giants defense has to account for.
Definitely. They like to throw to the backs early often. B-Rob has been, I think, way more effective than most folks were expecting. We saw a heavy dose of it in training camp, so I'm not necessarily surprised how good his hands have been. I also think they got to throw to the backs because they're not running the ball very well. They get away from it, or when they stick with it, it's not very effective. So you still got to try to include those guys because they're playmakers. But certainly they've been throwing to the backs. I mean, you think about Andy Reid, go back to his days coaching the Eagles. Like, he has always been a guy that wants to kind of get the ball in the hands of his playmakers, even if that means just – I mean, I remember, and I'm sure this happened to the Giants too, like Brian Westbrook with the Eagles, whatever, 15, 17 years ago, just torching the then Redskins. So, the EB is a disciple of that, and it's been interesting to watch.
We're talking with JP Finley. You can hear him on 106.7 The Fan in D.C., Commanders insider for NBC4 Sports in Washington, as we're previewing the Giants and the Commanders this Sunday at MetLife Stadium. So let's flip the script and move over to the Commanders defense. You look at their front 4. That's been the talk of the town over the last several years. Their 4 former first-round picks, and Chase Young seems to be finally healthy, JP, so that has been a positive for them. Maybe it's just me, but the one guy that doesn't seem to be jumping off the page is Daron Payne, maybe from a statistical standpoint. And as you well know, numbers don't tell the whole story. He's a very good run stopper. Is there validity behind that he's just being hidden by what Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat are doing? Or do you think Daron Payne is doing some damage? He's just not getting necessarily enough credit for that.
A little bit of both. I think Payne is a beast inside, especially with this banged up Giants O-line. I'm curious what this looks like. on Sunday. But Payne has been good, not great. Last year he was great, and all those guys really have shown flashes, but it hasn't been as consistent as maybe we've seen that they started the season rough. They gave up 30 points, at least 30 in 4 straight games. They kind of got it on track against Atlanta, but from a yardage standpoint, the Falcons moved the ball pretty well. They just had a ton of turnovers. I wonder if John Allen was on the injury report this week with a little bit of a knee issue. John had a little bit of plantar fascia in the training camp. But Chase has looked good. I kind of think Chase could have a big game in New York, honestly, especially considering the O-line situation. I mean, there's not a single starter expected to play, right?
Well, they've only had 5 different starting offensive line combinations, JP. And I mean, at this point, Evan Neal is probably going to play. So he would be the one starter. He's fighting through an ankle injury, though, to your point. So he's not fully healthy. But I'd be very surprised if he doesn't play based on this matchup. But yes, outside of him, you're talking about a game of musical chairs this season.
Yeesh, yeah.
So it certainly is a favorable situation for Washington. And we saw they just went up against the team with the number 1 sacks in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills, and Buffalo managed to get 3 sacks and a few quarterback hits. Though I do think the offensive line held up, and Tyrod Taylor's movement out of the pocket helped overshadow some of the struggles up front. So that's going to be something to watch, whether or not they try to navigate the Washington defensive line. One other guy, though, that is not included in those 4 that we talked about, who's been getting some production, is Casey Toohill, who already has 3 sacks. He had 2 against the Falcons. What has he been able to provide, and how much are they looking to get better production out of some of these complementary pass rushers?
Because Chase Young has missed so much time over the last 2 seasons, there's 2 guys, Casey Toohill and James Smith-Williams, that have kind of emerged as this like rotating other defensive end, and they're both pretty good. And Toohill has really good speed and athleticism, and I think that showed against Atlanta. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to be on the other side of a guy that's getting good pass rushes like Montez Sweat and just kind of cleaning it up. And I think Toohill took a good advantage of that. Kind of, as you pointed out, all of the different receivers with 100 yards or more and touchdowns, I mean, they go pretty far down the column in how many guys have registered a sack, a TFL, a QB pressure. It's, the headliners are obviously Chase and Montez and John Allen, whoever, but the depth at the D-line is pretty good. I mean, this guy like John Ridgway is pretty good. He comes in kind of their 5-man package. They've got some horses on the D-line,
which is a theme we've seen in the NFC East, whether it be the Philadelphia Eagles or the Dallas Cowboys. So it seems as if all of these teams are just trying to replicate one another with respect to the defensive fronts, and not necessarily a bad thing to do. As far as the back end is concerned, they made the investment in Emmanuel Forbes in the first round this year, and all of a sudden, you look at the snap count last week, JP, and he gets no defensive snaps. And you mentioned they've been giving up a lot of yardage, over 400 yards in total offense to each of their last 3 opponents. What do you read into this Forbes benching? Was this something that they just wanted to experiment with against Atlanta to send him a message? Or is this something that's going to happen moving forward and they're going to look at other options within that secondary?
It's a good question. So Forbes started the year rough. He has speed, has ball skills, but there is, I don't want to say an unwillingness, but the tape has not been kind to him in run support. And the thought was, you know what, we can deal with that as long as he's shutting guys down. And then in consecutive weeks, he's matched up against A.J. Brown in Philly, who torched him. And then he's matched up against DJ Moore with the Bears, who torched him. I mean, we're talking, I think A.J. Brown, I'm going off the top of my head, I want to say he had 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think DJ Moore went for 230 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, now not all that's on one player. You got the whole secondary, that's part of this thing, but it's gotten ugly, and that's why he got benched. It's one thing for a young corner to get beat in coverage. That's going to happen. But if you're getting beat bad and you are basically a liability when the opposition's running the ball, you got big trouble. And maybe they get him back on the field. One thing to watch is Kendall Fuller missed practice this week, had big old wrap on his knee. Veteran corner has been playing well for Washington for years, and certainly to start this season. Already has 2 picks on the year. Fuller told us he's going to play, that he's fine. This is just how he manages it. I tend to believe him, but, you know, you got a guy at least nursing something, and that Meadowlands turf is known for what it's known for. And I wouldn't be stunned if Forbes gets out there just as some rest or whatever. You know, it's an interesting situation with that secondary because they have given up a ton of explosive plays. That is almost kind of the one thing they didn't do last week. They still gave up some big ones, but not like the true backbreakers.
Well, and that's why this matchup is a bit fascinating, because the Giants have struggled to produce explosive plays on offense. But could they take advantage of a secondary that, to your point, has some questions, assuming, of course, if the play in the trenches can hold up, and by Tyrod Taylor, assuming he plays some time. So I agree with you. I think that's what's going to be interesting in terms of the pieces of the puzzle. Now, speaking of game-changing explosive plays, before I let you go, I want to turn to special teams, JP, and a familiar name to Giants fans is Jamison Crowder. He's also familiar to Washington fans because this is his second stint, but he was with the Giants this offseason. They elected to go in a younger direction with Eric Gray in the return game, and you look, he gets the 61-yard punt return last week, which was huge in terms of field positioning. How much of a boost has he been since he returned, and how concerning is that for the Giants, considering the last thing they can afford to do is give up field positioning at this point?
Yeah, he's been good. I mean, last week he popped the big one, which is obviously what you dream of, but kind of throughout he's been pretty good. You know, he had a strong return against the Eagles. He had a good one in Denver. He had another one that got called back, and he's explosive in the punt return game. And when you talk about X factors and all that sort of stuff, he could absolutely be one this week. Absolutely.
Well, just another facet to put under the microscope is the Giants and Commanders renew their rivalry Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. He is JP Finley. You can hear him weekdays on 106.7 The Fan in D.C., Commanders insider for NBC4 Sports in Washington. JP, it's always great to catch up with you. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and I very much look forward to talking down the road. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
You got it. My pleasure.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Giants are taking on Washington as they square off at MetLife Stadium. We're joined, as always, by the head coach of the New York Football Giants, Brian Daboll. And, Coach, you got a Washington team coming in here today, 3-3 on the season, coming off a win last week. This is a team that can get after the quarterback. As you've watched Washington and prepared for this week, what are some of the things that sort of jump off the tape that make them a dangerous defense?
Yeah, it all starts with their front four, 4 first-rounders that played well together. They played together for a while, and that drives their defense. The coverage and the front is tied together with the rush. They do a good job.
Coach, obviously they have been susceptible to giving up some big plays, but you got to look at it, objectively, that it's not all the time. When you see stuff like that, you got to kind of stick with your game plan, don't you, as far as how you go about getting to those kind of explosives, don't you? Sure,
and you see, how the explosive were made. Against Chicago, it was as tight as coverage as can be in about 3 plays. So that could have easily went the other way. This is a sound defensive football team that is playing well.
Coach, obviously you got Saquon Barkley back in the lineup last week. He got over 90 yards rushing and is such a key component to sort of creating more balance for your football team. How did he come out of the game first and foremost, and what have you seen out of this week that has you encouraged about even better production and even a better Barkley?
Yeah, I think his ankle's improving. Normal nicks and bruises after a game. He hasn't played in a little bit, and had a good week.
Let's go to the other side. Washington, they can have explosive plays in their own. They got a talented guy in Terry McLaurin. Sam Howell has done a nice job at the quarterback position. Looks like he's a guy that's willing to kind of hang in there and take some chances. As you've studied him, what are some of the things that have impressed you about the second-year quarterback?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's got really good footwork. He does a great job of standing in the pocket and giving his skilled players opportunities to make plays. He's accurate. He's competitive. They throw the ball a lot with him, and I think he's improved. Every game he's played, he's a good young quarterback.
And then just finally, their running game. It feels like every week we ask you about a player that from Alabama. Brian Robinson is accounted for 5 touchdowns this year, 3 running, 2 receiving. Then they also got Gibson, who's a veteran guy. Talk a little bit about their run scheme and what's made it so effective to this point.
Well, Brian is a downhill runner. He's a big back that is tough to tackle in space. He's not looking to go down. He's not looking to go out of bounds. He's looking for contact as a runner, whether it's in the run game or the screen game. Gibson's a good change back for him, but Brian is a guy that we have to get 11 hats to the ball with.
Coach, we appreciate a couple minutes as always. Best of luck against Washington.
Thanks, Pop. Appreciate you.
When we